7 years, by the way. With no further ado, Gabe H.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming. This stays there. Good evening. My name's Gabe, and I am a grateful recovered addict and alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 3rd, 2014, and for that I am absolutely grateful. I want to thank James and Jordy and everyone here at Moss Lane for having me. It really is a privilege. I really shouldn't be here. I do see some familiar faces here. This is awesome. Good stuff. Guys, I should be either dead or in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice right now. Probably a lot of y'all are familiar with that and can understand, probably feel the same way. And that's a blessing. So a couple of things I want to do. There's a little disclaimer. My story it's a little bit crazy. It by no means does anyone have to go through this to get what a lot of people in this room have and thousands of people, millions of people out there have received. Okay? This is about hope. It's about restoration. God does things. This disease manifests itself. It's a spiritual disease, and it manifests itself physically. And God, in His awesome way, does cool things so people have certain testimonies so He can use them. It's all glory to God. That's what this whole thing is about. This is His glory, not mine. This is not a competition ever about how bad things can get, and it's not a competition in sobriety either. And in saying that, there's something I like to do, and it's I tried to get this thing for a long time. I turned 18 years old in La Hacienda. I went there deservingly so. I tried to stop. I got so drunk at prom, and I was chased by the police and the principals and the teachers, and I ended up stopping traffic and telling everyone in San Angelo how effing awesome my principal was. And while horns are honking and people are screaming at me, and so I had to go to some sort of alternative schooling for a certain amount of time, and I went to La Hacienda and went there. I was in the young adult program. I had no intention of getting better. I saw these steps. I did the paperwork so I could get home, and I went to a multitude of treatment facilities after that. And part of the problem that I realized was I was always stuck on the how. And I never asked why. And I want everyone in this room to ask why. Why do I go and work with other addicts and alcoholics? Why do I go wash feet? What is the purpose of this? Does anyone know how many times recovered is written in this book? 19. Forward to the first edition says it. We're not cured from alcoholism, but we are recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. My life is completely different than it was 7 years ago. There are so many blessings that go on in my life that I'm able to see right now and experience right now because of God in this program and because of my disease. I wouldn't trade anything that I'm about to tell you for the world. Neither would my mother, neither would my father. And that's a blessing and a miracle in and of itself. The other thing, too, is we hear a lot that, I said it when I was sober for the first 9 months, and I said, I'm here on my own. I don't have a card to sign. That's not true. Nobody comes through that door on a winning streak. I don't care why you're here. I don't care if you're getting a card signed. I don't care what your motives are. You're here for a reason. God wants you here. And you may hear something either tonight or someone else or some other night, and I encourage you to keep coming back. I'm talking to the person, to the newcomer who is struggling right now when the struggle is real. Good. I hope you've been miserable for a couple of months, and I mean that. That is the most lonely, painful, and beautiful place on earth. It's immensely valuable to God precisely because it has no value to us. Zero. There's nothing left to exploit. There's nothing there for me except this surrender. It's where I learned to rely on God. And I will always look back on that time as that time that I learned to rely on God, and I got to spend it with Him alone. I was born and raised in San Angelo, Texas, born in 1983, and I was born into a really good family. I wasn't abused. My dad's a doctor, very well-to-do. I was a silver spoon having. Everything was given to me. I was spoiled rotten growing up. That's a God's honest truth. And I took. And I also had this problem, this thing inside of me, because, I was kind of smaller than my friends, and I couldn't play sports like they could. I was also a Texas Tech fan, which I'm sure there's some in here because we're in Amarillo, but all my other friends were University of Texas and A&M fans. And so I thought that's why I didn't measure up. There was this hole inside of me. And I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't find anything to adjust this. And it talks in the doctor's opinion, and Bill Wilson writes between the two doctors' opinions, that we are maladjusted to life, right? There's something wrong. I've got this ego disorder that I'm too good for everything and I'm not good enough for at the same time. And it's insane. I couldn't put this into words. And then something happened in my life. When I was 14 years old, my parents and I were in a private plane and we crashed. And it was a pretty bad crash. But my dad caught on fire, blew up inside. Both my parents broke their backs. And, I blacked out. I was in shock. And I know I helped them get out. But I came back home and I came to San Angelo, Texas, where everyone knows everybody. And all of a sudden I was this hero. And my ego, and I'd say this because of what it did to my ego, I found something. Well, just so happened about a month later, these friends that used to pick on me all the time decided they're going to hang out with me. And I grew up with a bar next to my bedroom in the basement, which I don't recommend that to any parents. And we started drinking. I had my first drink. I took 12 shots of Russian vodka, Smirnoff. And now I'd really found something. I had arrived, as Bill said. I'd finally dialed something inside of me that made me feel okay. And I could outdrink my friends. I could outdo something they couldn't do. And they were passed out and I was still drinking. And we drank like that every single weekend. Then we were always in the top 2% of our class. I received 12 MIPTs, and an important person in this story is my godfather. He's a criminal defense attorney in San Angelo, Texas. When I was born, he was there, and he said, I want Gabe to go to the Citadel. He's going to become an attorney. My parents wanted me to go to Tech. I ended up following in my godfather's footsteps. Quasi-godfather, none of us were Christians. We never went to church, not once. I never picked up a Bible in my life during this time. But he was there. He was going to be the person that if something happened to me, he would be there to my parents, he'd be there to raise me. And he bailed me out of all kinds of things, mainly legal issues. I went to the Citadel, and, let me go back. In high school, we drank every single weekend, sometimes on the weekdays. My father and I got into fist fights because I would get caught sneaking back in. I went to college, went to the Citadel, knowing that if I went to Texas Tech, I'd probably die in a gutter. Or it'd at least take me 10 years to graduate. So I went to a military college in South Carolina because of TIP, and I tried to get myself kicked out of there. I got so drunk, and at the time I was academic officer of our company, and our XO and our company commander had gotten removed for various reasons, so I'm in charge of the company, and I decided I'm going to drink as much Everclear as possible and see what happens. And I went on a rampage, and I tried to fight everyone in my company. The tactical officer, I pulled the cop's gun out of his holster, tried to stab myself with a pen. This is who I am. Okay? I hate myself, and I can't figure out why.
Closer to the mic. They have a hard time hearing you back.
Sorry about that. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So by the grace of God, because I was always in this leadership position, we were about to graduate. They let me graduate, and so I walked the stage and stayed in Charleston, South Carolina for another year and drank every single day of that year, morning to night. then I went to law school in St. Mary's, at St. Mary's in San Antonio, Texas. While I'm at St. Mary's, I don't remember anything. I went to class probably 50% of the time, and I'm a good test taker. I can cram, and I'll stay awake all night long, eating Adderall, snorting Adderall, doing whatever I need to do to stay awake, and I'm going to drink that entire time. Hard liquor. So at that time, every single day consists of Adderall and alcohol. And my friends are like, at 7 in the morning, they're smelling scotch on my breath, and they're like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "What, y'all don't do this?" Yeah, I'm serious. This is how I get through my day. I'm not going to go take a test unless I have 5 or 6 shots of tequila in me. I mean, this is how I operate. And this worked until it stopped working. So I met a girl in law school, and we moved in with each other. And we were planning on getting married. She asked me one day, she said, "It's either me or the bottle." The bottle. I didn't think she was going to leave till she left. She left the day we graduated. And then I flew to Charleston for a wedding, and when I came back, all of her stuff was gone. Her room was empty. So I tried to drink myself to death for the next 3 months, and her and all of her friends and our friends went and took the bar exam, and I was lying naked on my floor, and my friends are over there feeding me shots just so I can eat some cereal, so I can get some substance in. They finally take me to San Angelo and drop me off and say, "You need to do something with this guy." And my 2 best friends, who at the time were banging heroin and methamphetamines, decided that the guy that's drinking himself to death needs to go to rehab. So they're not going to take me sober, though, right? So we wake up at 9 in the morning and we get loaded. We go to a bar that's open all night long, or opens early, and they had to smoke outside, so they didn't realize how many shots of tequila I was taking. And I remember the bartender saying, "Do you have a death wish?" And I just said, "You just keep them coming. Just keep them coming." We stopped and got a bunch of Lortabs, and I downed those on the way down there and polished off another bottle of Crown Royal. So we get there, and they're dumping me out. And this is nothing new, guys. I've known these guys. I grew up with them. One of them is a day older than me. His name's Houston. And him and I, to this day, he's sober. We talk every single day. And they just dumped me out. I mean, they dumped me out everywhere. They drugged me out of bars. They dumped me in my bed. This was nothing new, and I don't blame them for any of this. But they dumped me out, and thank God there was a nurse there, a registered nurse, and she realized there was something wrong, and I stopped her breathing. And so they rushed me to the hospital, intubated me, and a few days later I woke up, and my sister and mom are sitting next to me, and they're both crying, and they're looking at me bewildered because I just kind of came to. And the ICU nurse comes in and asks me what day it is, and I got it right, and asked me what town I was in, and I got that right. I was in Abilene at Hendricks. And they were like, "I can't believe it. And he's got brain cells left." And my BAC was at 0.556. So it was pretty high. And the only reason why I survived that is because my tolerance was so high. So from there, I went back to detox, and then I went out to the hill country for Serenity House, went to treatment, and met a girl. And immediately we left together. She actually picked me up. She left a little before me. She picked me up, and we went back to San Angelo, and imagine what happened. We relapsed together. And I was following her out of town, and I decided I was going to join my brother-in-law at a Celebrate Recovery meeting, and I've got a bottle of scotch underneath my car seat, and I'm out there pulling on this thing in between. And I'm driving home, and I turn the wrong way going down 87, and there's a DPS officer, and he lights me up. So I go to jail. I bond myself out. I get in a car drunk again the next week, and I go to jail again. Then I go to my parents' ranch, and they don't want me there, and so they have me arrested for trespassing, and I go to jail again. And that's 3 times in like 8-9 days. And so Tip, having the pull that he has in San Angelo, said, "Look, let's get him into a CRTC program. We'll make these tickets go away." This is what he needs, right? He needs some time to sober up and realize that he's got a great future in front of him. He's got a law degree. He just needs to go take the bar exam. No one, not my father, no one understood this. My mother kind of did, and that's something I need to say real quick. One of my sponsees the other day said, "I need to tell you where I went wrong." You didn't go wrong anywhere, okay? You are an alcoholic because you are. This is genetic. My grandfather drank himself to death. I watched his liver fail, and both of my uncles are alcoholics, and they have been sober for 30 plus years. This isn't anyone's fault. It's the way it is. Okay? It's And I have to explain that to my sponsees. And you're absolutely blessed because of it. That's the psychic change we'll get to here in a little bit. So, back to my story. I went to SATF, which is part of CRTC. It's a 9-month program for probation. Graduated that and managed to talk myself into going to Austin, Texas, because that's where I need to go. Because I don't need to be in San Angelo. I can stay sober in Austin. They're like, okay, fair enough. Let's let them go to Austin, Texas. So I go to Austin. There's no aftercare, and I've completely conned my way into doing this. I've got myself a house I'm renting, and again, I'm just taking from all these people. Just taking everything I can. I'm giving nothing to anybody. Get to Austin and decide, well, you know what? I'm not going to drink, but I'm going to go to the strip clubs because I like strip clubs. And if you go on Sundays, there's not that many people there, and you have the place to yourself. And so that's what I did. Why I'm at this place, it's called Expose in Austin, Texas, I see a girl. She works there. And she saw me, and we recognized each other. And she came over, and she's like, do I know you from somewhere? And I said, we've got to know each other from somewhere. And turns out she asked, did you ever go to the Southern Belle in Charleston, South Carolina? Well, as a matter of fact, we did all the time. And so we knew each other. And then we spent some time together outside of this place. We developed a business relationship. Let's say that. And one thing led to another. And at this time, I'm just paying for the cocaine. And I'm not drinking, so I'm okay, right? This is insane, is what this is. But to me, it's completely rational and completely sane at the time, and I'm hanging on, and this is what I need in my life so I can go take the bar exam and be successful. Well, then she moves in. Don't do that either. She moves in, and I lived about 1,000 feet away from Betitech Middle School, and I had a sponsor at the time. He was an attorney, worked at the AG's office, and he said, Gabe, and she moved in a few of her friends too. He said, Gabe, they're going to raid your house because you're running a brothel. In a school zone, 1,000 feet away from it, you're going to go to prison. So I was like, maybe I should reconsider some things, right? So I went home and I kicked her out, and I nicely, of course I'm loaded. At this time I have relapsed, I'm drinking. And I kick her out, and she punches me like 10 times, and kicks a hole in the wall, it destroys like half my house. And I'm watching this, and she leaves, and with her friends, and I've got 2 handles of scotch, and I'm drinking, and my 2 dogs are with me. I had 2 dogs that were like my children. They both since passed, but so they're with me, and I'm sitting there, and it turns out a friend of ours that was in the military that was dating one of her friends called me, and I was drunk and said, I just want to die, leave me alone. And he took that seriously. So he called her, and she convinced him that he needed to call the police and tell them I'm suicidal. And so they both call the police and tell them that I'm suicidal. And I'm sitting in my chair drinking my scotch, and I hear my name come out over a loudspeaker. Okay, and I told you I've already relapsed at this time. When I relapsed, I was driving drunk in a blackout, turned in front of a car. They hit me. They hit and ran me, but I got a DWI. So I'm on bond right now for a DWI. I got lots of DWIs. I'm going to skip a lot of stuff, guys, because I got to get to a little bit of solution, too. And so I'm on bond, and I hear my name come over the loudspeaker. And what I thought was a little weird was when I looked out the blinds, they were, like, lined up in my cul-de-sac. You know, like, why don't you just come and knock? You know, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Y'all are all, you know, far distance away, like I'm going to hurt you or something. But I'm thinking in my head, she called and told them that I'm drinking on bond, right? So I've got a law degree. I've spent my life doing criminal law on both sides of the aisle. And I'm not going to go outside and incriminate myself, so I'm just going to lock the doors, and I'm going to take my dogs and go into my bedroom and finish these bottles off and pass out. This is what I do. So I do this, initiate this plan. Well, evidently the police had another plan, and I wake up, and there is smoke everywhere. There is dust and smoke, and I look down, and there's a robot sitting next to my bed. And the robot is talking to me, and it says, come out with your hands in the air. So first I'm thinking, what year is it? And second, I'm like, okay, this has gotten extremely serious in a very small amount of time. I'm going to follow the robot. You win. You blew my doors down with C4. I don't want no problems. Okay. So I'm following the robot out, and he's going, and I'm so drunk that I passed out on my couch on the way out. I was trying to comply, but just physically couldn't comply. So I passed out on the couch. Well, that's when they decided they're going to send in the SWAT teams through the front and back door, and blew, flashbang grenades, blew out all the windows, broke a couple of my ribs, tore my feet up, dragging me barefoot through the glass and the rubble. Turns out, in God's magnificent timing, someone had just fired a couple of rounds in the neighborhood, and she called and said that I was not only suicidal, but I was held up with a firearm in my house. There were no firearms in my house. They were all at my house, in my parents' house in West Texas, because they didn't trust me to have any firearms in the house at this time. There was a firearm. It was an old roommate who was up running a legislative agenda up in Dallas, Texas. It was in a locked gun case. There was no ammunition. And my friends were trying to explain this to the police, but they didn't want to hear it. So they come in after this. They realized I really hadn't committed a crime, and they might have used excessive force. So I'm in the ER. My parents are standing next to me, and, they're proud, as always. They're back in the ER with their son. And, I'm bleeding and broken and just demoralized. And so they asked my parents to leave, and the police were like, well, look, your dogs are safe. We'll let your friends come in and get them. We probably overreacted. We're going to scrub anything from the report about alcohol being in there. You're going to have to go to the funny farm for a few days, but after that, you're free to go. Let's do it. So I go to the funny farm until the doctor sees me and decides that I'm not suicidal. I'm just a horrible alcoholic, and I go on about my way. I go to Austin Recovery Center for 30 days, did an outpatient treatment center there for 90 days, and I still can't get right. And every treatment I went to, I'm writing stuff down, and I'm doing this inventory, and I'm filling pages up, and I have no idea why I'm doing it. I'm just trying to get out there and get to my next drink or do whatever it needs to do. I am so lost. Because what I was looking for, I didn't know where it was. It was right in front of me the whole time. So I get out, and I'm drinking myself to death still. I've managed to get enough time. I went back to work at the Capitol. I worked at the Capitol in 2007, and this time I went back and worked for our state senator. And I was Senate Committee for State Affairs Senate Clerk. And I knew at this point, I was in such bad shape. I was like, if I can just make it to the end of session, I will put myself back in treatment. But I knew in my heart I wasn't going to make it. And on top of things, because I kind of caused a little issue in my last place of residence, and they had to evacuate everybody in my cul-de-sac for like 9 hours, I was kind of persona non grata in my neighborhood. So I moved to East Austin, because East Oldthorpe is where an addict and alcoholic needs to move to in Austin. And because they had crack cocaine over there for cheap. And so I'm smoking crack, and I am drinking alcohol, and I am working at the state capitol, and I am smoking crack in the senator's bathroom, and I am just trying my hardest to make it through every single day. And I'm sitting in Tent City behind the Circle K with a needle in my arm, doing things that I never thought in my life I would ever do. I'd become that person that my parents warned me about, I promise. Contracted hepatitis C, banging heroin, smoking methamphetamine, smoking crack. I mean, I smoked half the ceiling in my apartment, I'm pretty sure. Just crawling around on floors, doing things that are absolutely insane. So I, needless to say, lost my job at the state capitol. And when I lost my job, the judge who I was on probation for at this time for that DWI I had, she went to law school with my boss. And they immediately threw me in jail and wanted me to go do a 6-month program. And I told them, no, I've done these programs. Let me sit this out in jail, please. I've had enough programs. And at that point, I turned 30 in Del Valle in Austin, Texas, spent 3 months in there. And I made the commitment, I'm going to go get sober. I'm tired of this. So I got out and immediately got a paycheck and went and bought as much crack as I could and a girl and went to a hotel room. Yeah. And then I ran out of money, so now I'm living underneath the bridge, and my parents found me through some friends. My phone was still turned on, thankfully. And they brought me back to San Angelo, where I met some people at the group that I'm now a member of, San Angelo Solution Group in San Angelo, Texas. These guys are fantastic. My current boss was my first sponsor. And I got to a point, guys, where I was drinking everything that had alcohol in it, and I'm going to AA meetings, and I can't quit. I can't stop. I'm having delirium tremens. I'm shaking. I'm throwing up so much that I don't even have a bucket below my bed. I'm just throwing up on the carpet. I drank all the cooking sherry, all the Listerine, the rubbing alcohol, and when you drink rubbing alcohol, you typically end up back in the hospital. So here was another hospital trip. This is like number 15, and I'm in there blood-banded and throwing up blood because I have to get my fix. And I'm getting dropped off because they won't let me drive. I'm getting dropped off. My parents lived on a ranch, so they would drive me into town, and they would take turns. My uncle, who's sober, would come down, spend 2 weeks. My parents are living in Rio Dos at the time, so my dad took a job there. I'm staying at their ranch with either my mother or my uncle with 2-week intervals. They would take me and drop me off at AA. I would run to the nearest liquor store. And then they would find me drunk in the parking lot, laying down, blacked out. I had the DT so bad one night, and at this time, guys, they had diagnosed me for bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, ADHD, you name it, they diagnosed me with it, and they medicated me for it. And so now I'm on medication all over the place, and I'm not saying anything, I'm not making any statements on medication, I'm just telling you that I was medicated. And when you get off medication cold turkey, it does not make this any better. And I lost my medication, so then I'm driving to Austin, Texas, and I had a revelation. I had something happen to me, and I'm dying inside. And I had this spiritual experience, and I met God. And I begged him. I said, God, please. I did the 3rd step prayer on my knees, and I actually meant it. And something happened in me, and something happened that night, and I didn't want to go to the bar across the street. So I returned home, did my 5th step again with my sponsor, and hallelujah, all of a sudden the desire to drink was lifted. And I'm going to AA, I'm not on paper, and I am, I'm sponsoring people, and then I met this girl, right? She cut my hair, and I've been praying, Lord, put a good girl in my life, and here she is. And lo and behold, we fell in love. And we fell in love, and I did not even realize it because this disease is sneaky, and it's cunning, and it's baffling, and it will destroy everything in its wake. And I transformed my addiction into this girl. I put her in the place where God went. And I'm doing all this other stuff just because just like it says in the 3rd step, I want all y'all to think I'm a swell fella. I'm still trying to direct and control everything in my life. I'm controlling her. I'm controlling everything. And when she wouldn't do what I wanted her to do, and when she wouldn't say what I wanted her to say and satisfy this and make this feel, this insecurity whole, man, I got upset. My feelings got hurt. And it hurt. And it hurt really, really bad. I had 9 months of sobriety. I was about to pick up my 9-month chip. I've got to make this quick. And we were in a fight. I lost my medication again, except for the speed. Don't lose your ADHD medication. And we got into a huge fight. I relapsed at her house. She kicked me out. I went back to my parents' ranch, and I'm at my parents' ranch, and I basically shot the lock off. I went to their basement. But this time they trusted me, and I took enough alcohol to do the job. And I took it down to the Foreman house. And while I'm down there, my mother drives into town. My sponsor and my current sponsor come out there, and they try to get me to go to a sober living house. And I'm not going. I'm in a blackout drunk. And they said, Gabe, there was something so spiritually wrong with you that I've never seen anything like it. And there was. I was in a struggle for my soul. I truly believe that. So does everyone else. And I wanted to drink myself to death, and please don't get in my way. My mother drives down there, and she meets Tip Hargrove, my quasi-godfather. And they come out there to remove me from the premises. Mind y'all, I lived out there with my 2 dogs in the middle of nowhere. I had a hot AR-15 right next to my front door at all times because random people come out there. They come inside. There's a struggle. I'm in a blackout drunk. He picks me up, throws me on the ground. The fists are thrown. My mom's screaming, get off him, get off him, get off him. They go back into the parking. They leave the building. I grab the AR-15 and follow them outside. My mom's truck is here. Tip's truck is here. They turn around and I said, get off my effing ranch. Exact words. And they turned around and they said, Gabe, this is not your ranch. And they start walking at me, and I'm standing in the carport, and I put the proverbial line in the sand, and I discharged that gun multiple times. I came to briefly, this is all fuzzy, most of this comes from police reports and my parents, Tip and my mother's testimony. Tip is screaming, do you know what you have done? I look down, tips on the ground. I'm pointing the barrel at his head, and I've shot him through the top of the foot, and my mother's been shot through the femoral artery, and she's bleeding out. She is dying on the carport in front of me, and there is blood spraying everywhere. I throw the AR-15 and ask and beg Tip, can you get her help? He says, I don't know, Gabe. They leave, and I'm convinced I've just killed my mother. I love my mother to death. I loved her when this happened. I loved her before that. And I'm pretty sure she's dead, and now I need to die. So, Texas Rangers, everybody, SWAT teams, DPS, you name it, they come out there, and I'm waving a 12-gauge shotgun at all these people trying to get them to shoot me. One of our general managers at my business at the time was a police officer, and he was a hostage negotiator. And my boss, my current boss, and my current sponsor are begging him not to kill me. And by the grace of God, they didn't. And they had me dead to rights. And they didn't shoot. I'm out there waving a gun like a crazed lunatic, and they didn't shoot me. So then I went inside. They went and got a tank from Abilene, Texas, and knocked all the windows out and threw in tear gas. And so now I can't breathe. And I've got the 12 gauge, I got my Bible, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, well, this has got to end. So I put the 12 gauge in my mouth, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I do this, with the thumb or with the toe? Because you don't want to mess this up. I messed up everything in my life. Let's not mess this one up, because I don't want to maim myself. And two thoughts came across my head. Look, guys, I love history, and I just thought, I was an English major, but history is my hobby, and I thought this must be what Hitler felt like at the very end with shells landing on top of his bunker. And then I thought, something told me you're not Hitler. And then I thought my dad's going to have to clean my brains up off the back of this wall. So I got on my knees and I prayed and I grabbed that Bible. It's still in my car. It took me forever to get it out of evidence. And I walked outside and they tackled me and they took me to jail. And I stayed in jail. That was June 3rd. That was June 2nd, 2014. I woke up June 3rd, 2014, and I was in my own personal hell. They sentenced me for 8 years in TDCJ. It's a 3G crime, so I had to do half of it. And then on my mother's crime, they gave me 10 years deferred adjudication. I went to prison, guys, and I decided I was going to make this time in vain. Let me say this. I need to hurry because y'all need to hear this. I spent 1.5 years in the penitentiary, and I was studying God. I was seeking God. I was reading our book. I was reading spiritual texts. And this girl stayed with me, and I was still talking to her. And I talked to her every single morning and every single night. And if we had a bad phone call, I had a bad day. That girl was my rock. And then I got moved to Beaumont, Texas. And it was 8 hours away. And then she started drifting away. She met somebody else, and it turned out to don't call me in the mornings. And it was horrible. It was. And I'm praying to God that He restores this relationship. Please, God, bring her back. Let her see that her ill ways. I've got 4 years to do, and she's 13 years older than me, and she's trying to go do her own thing. Shocker. And guys, until she walked out of my life, was I able to find any kind of hope? Was I able to search and put my measure of faith in the right place? Until she walked out of my life, I wasn't going to find freedom. And that is God's honest truth. When she walked out of my life, I felt a loneliness and a despair, and I was finally in a place where I was teachable, and I had the requisite humility and fearlessness and honesty that this book talks about. It was finally there. And I had some cats that were sitting next to me right before she gave me that letter that said, don't ever contact me again. They just happened to be in the program. They said, hey, man, come over here and sit down. You need to get some freedom because you've got none. When you get that letter, don't ever contact her again. And you need to walk this thing out with us and let us show you some things and be quiet and listen. And I did. For the first time in my life, I listened to instruction. And I never wrote her back. Guys, I started walking this program out and doing this for real. And that pain, it hurt. And it was the most beautiful place on earth because I finally started to figure out who Gabe Hughes was. I finally started to figure out who my identity was, and I finally started to ask the question why, and I couldn't get enough of it. I read this book and everything else, and I spent every day with God that I could. And I worked in the law library, and I made that work about God too. Everything started to change. My heart started to change. And even in prison, I started to realize I had this psychic change that this was no longer a curse. This was a blessing. I might not ever practice law again. But what I was experiencing behind barbed wire fence was so freeing and so incredible. And I can't explain it to this day. It's an experience, y'all. It is a spiritual awakening. And it's the coolest thing ever. And then you get to share it with these other people. And then I get to look around and realize I don't own any of this. I'm just participating in this purpose on the top of page 77. And that's to be a maximum service to the people about me and God. I started walking this thing out, and on Christmas Day, I called home, and my mother got on the phone, and she said, I want you to talk to Tip. I hadn't talked to Tip in 2 years. Get on the phone with him, and he said, and we talked for a little while, and I called back later that night, and my mother's crying. Puts Tip back on the phone. He said, Gabe, and this guy is not a spiritual cat. He just realized something. He heard something in my voice. He saw something through a telephone. And he said, Gabe, there's something different. He wanted me to go to prison. He was resentful with good reason. And he said, Gabe, something about you has changed, and I want you to come home. And I broke down crying because I didn't understand what grace was until that day, because I didn't deserve that. To this day, I don't deserve to be standing here. This is all God's glory. He told me to come home. He wanted me to come home, and he would do everything he could to facilitate that. I still had to do 4 years. Guys, this humility, when we walked these steps, I realized I was finally at this point, and it wasn't for me. When you get to this point in my life, this experience, I know some of y'all experience this. When you surrender, it just is, and therefore it's just God's. And I just gave it to him, and I said, I don't care. It is yours, all of it. You take it and you drive. I'm just along for the ride, and I don't care what happens. When you have that kind of humility, and it's, guys, I don't practice this perfectly all the time. I have to do this program every single day. Trust me, I mess up, but I had to have that to get this thing. That is when, C.S. Lewis calls it the unsmiling concentration on self is the mark of hell. I'm the kind of guy that will beat myself up on everything I say to somebody, everything I do. I will leave this place and I will beat myself to hell on what I said all the way home if I don't work this program. I promise you, I will. When we give this stuff to God and we make it about him and about the other person, when we have the servant's heart and we go wash people's feet, and by that in Alcoholics Anonymous, I mean go help other alcoholics. Because that's what we're uniquely qualified to do. I can sit up here and spit fire all night long. I want you to see my walk out there. I want you to see what I'm doing. That's the biggest testimony to God. That's what brings my Father peace. It's not that I'm sorry anymore. I said those thousands of times. It's about my actions. Guys, faith without works is dead. Faith by definition has action in it. It is a calling, and every single person in this room is called to go do this. I got out of prison. I made my first parole, and I went to a program. And guys, when I was there, I never had an issue. I walked through every single locked door that was in my way. I didn't have a problem with offenders or with guards, because when you're making it about the other person and not about yourself, you just don't have that fear. It removes cowardice. It removes resentment. It removes all of these things when you're making it about somebody else and therefore making this about God. And I walked through that place, and it changed my absolute life. It changed how I saw everything and everybody. I realized that most of the people in there didn't come from where I did. And I was able to become friends with these people and just get everything political out of the way and realize, let's start with one thing that we have in common, and that's God. I don't care what this person voted for. Trust me, the news makes me upset every single morning. But when I do this program, this is what keeps me humble, because it does. But when I do this thing and I go work with somebody else, I don't ask them who they voted for. I don't ask them what their political affiliations are. I don't care what color of skin they are. I don't care if they're from Mars. They are struggling with this thing, and I do this thing because God did it for me, and I'm giving it away freely like He gave it to me. And it changes this. I am a better person at work. I'm a better son. I'm a better friend. I'm a better person in Alcoholics. I'm a better person all around because this gets changed on a continual basis. There's a lot of darkness out there right now. And thank God that I have this that points me true north. And I'm going to say this too, because I have sponsors. By the way, let me finish, because I always forget how this ends. And people are like, well, how did it end? So, guys, I got out of prison. And I say this this is God's glory again. My relationship with my mother and father is better than it has ever been. I just had dinner with them last night, and I finally got to the point in my life where I don't take anymore. It's about giving. We have a saying in here, and I'm sure you all have heard it. Victims never recover. They may get some sobriety, but victims never recover. Because as long as I'm taking and making this about me, my ego is being satisfied one way or the other. It is about making it about the other person and giving away. And when I give away, it's this paired polarity. It's this paradox. When I give away, I get. And it's a supernatural thing about this, guys. I did this. I got out of prison in January of 2019, and I went and I started peeling sticker off extrusion at my boss and old sponsor's place. I'm the executive vice president there for compliance now, and I get to work with incredible people. He's in the program, and we have dozens of people in the program up there at work. My mother's relationship with me, she goes into the county jail, and she takes the word in there every single weekend, and it's the coolest thing that she does in her life. It has changed and transformed her life. God took something tragic because of this program and made it something beautiful. And that is possible for every single person in here. And the reason why I say these things and where I'm at now, I walked out of prison and they gave me the hepatitis C cure for free. I didn't pay a penny for it. They just gave it. It was a brand new one, Maverick. These blessings just started happening because I wasn't looking for them. I wasn't expecting these promises. I had this peace in my heart that I'd received. It was this joy that I finally found by doing this and making it about other people. And incredible things happened. Doors opened up. Spiritual things happened. My relationship with my family changed. It says in step 3 that we are producers of confusion rather than harmony. That finally got turned around. I started to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. I used to be the root of every problem in my family, and my parents call me now because I'm the glue. I get to be that today. For 30 years, I wasn't. I destroyed that family. So I walked out of prison. I'm at where I am now, and I have sponsees. I love working with people. When I say that, there are times when a sponsee calls me, and I'm like, golly, I don't want to go work with this person right now. And then guess what I do? I go work with them. Guys, in Bill's story on page 14, it says, this is simple but not easy. A sacrifice must be made. It means the destruction of self-centeredness, and we turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. This is revolutionary and drastic, and it absolutely is. When I go, I really would rather go be about Gabe because I'm a big deal. I go and I work with this guy instead, and I put my plans on the side, and I get blessed every single time in incomprehensible ways. That's the blessing. If you don't believe this supernatural power exists, I dare you to try this program. I absolutely dare you to.
You're good. You got like 9 minutes.
Okay. I have sponsees all the time ask me, hey, would you please take me through these steps again? No. I don't know why it is, but step 12 is so hard for so many people. The first 9 steps just gets the damage removed and allows me to clean up my side of the street. Yes, I surrender and I give myself over to God and I do this stuff. But then so many people stop when the magic, right before they get to experience the magic of this program, and that is going and working with other people. I'm not taking you back through the steps. What I will do is I will help you sponsor somebody. And guys, nowhere in this book does it say wait for the newcomer to come up to us. It says go approach the newcomer. Go find them, because when we come in here, our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs are pretty skewed. Every single one of us. We don't know where to turn. It is our job to go approach them. Bill Wilson said it, this is about an adequate representation of this program. And if I'm not working with other people, if I'm just going around and talking good talk and not doing any of this stuff, that's not the contract. Nothing is going to change here if I don't go work with God's kids for free and for fun. The job that I have at Principal LED is how I put food on my table. That's it. The job I do for God is what I do, and I love it to death. I shouldn't be here. That's a miracle. I saw people, you said there's only one person, everyone is pretty much sober since I saw them in Denver City that went down there. That's a miracle.
We have 2 relapses, but they both
But still,
are sober now.
Exactly. They came back.
Yeah, they came back.
And guys, if you relapse, lots of us have relapsed. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. It takes a lot of humility to walk back through these doors. Please do. Pick up, knock the dust off of you, and start this thing over again. I look back on everything that God has done in my life. And I wake up every single morning, guys, and I get on my knees and I pray. And I do this every night too. It's like brushing my teeth. If I was going to brush my teeth and clean myself physically, you better believe now I clean myself spiritually. I practice 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 every single day all throughout my day. And guys, this isn't something I just check off. This is something that I do because this is what is being changed. And it has changed who I am. And it continues to do that. That being said, if I stop doing this, I know what I'm capable of. I know how selfish I am because my righteousness, guys, is but rags. It's filthy. I get to do this and everything changes. So my sister, guys, it's not like I robbed some people. I did that too. I robbed them for everything. Physical stuff, emotional, security, you name it. I shot my mother, my sister's mom with a machine gun, and she was resentful. And this is a believer. This is someone who is spiritual. She would bring my mother to visit me in the penitentiary, and she would sit there and she would be nice. And then when I got home, I saw her a few times, and 1.5 years went by and she texted me. She said, "Can I have your address?" I said, "Yeah." 1.5 years after I got out of the penitentiary, I get this letter. And it says, and I cry every time I read this, by the way. It says, "Dear Gabe, over 1 year ago, you wrote to me asking me for forgiveness. You finally put into words what I longed to hear, and I was so grateful. And yet, even through my gratefulness, I didn't respond. I did forgive you, and I do forgive you. But at the moment in time, it was still so much more of a process for me. I was in the process of forgiving you, even though I woke daily declaring forgiveness and blessings. I don't know why it has taken me so long to respond. Part of it sheer laziness or the art of the letter writing seems to have been lost. Part of it fear and stirring up feelings I was afraid were still there. Anger, doubt, hurt, which would tell me I hadn't forgiven. And part of it disobedience to God for the unknowns. Either way, I sit here this morning with no stirred up feelings other than love. I am so grateful to have you back. It has been so long, much longer than that physical prison sentence. And I do forgive. And I ask you to please forgive me for taking so long, for being so slow, for being unforgiving and unloving, for not being there for you. Jesus showed a side of me that I didn't care for, and I struggled madly with it. But today I walk free. I love you. I am proud of you. I forgive you. I forgive myself. I desire for us to start anew as brother and sister, to get to know each other, to be a support for each other, to be a listening ear for each other. You are my only brother, and I'm so glad you are mine. I love you, Kristen. I asked y'all at the beginning, why? That's why. That's the power of God and the glory of God on full parade and display. He can restore anything, and I want everyone in this place to know this. I have had so many people in prison and outside of the barbed wire ask me questions like, the state of Texas has terminated my rights to my children. Does that mean it's over? Don't ever put God in a box. Don't ever put God in a box. You go do this, watch the magic happen. I've seen it over and over and over again. He restored every relationship in my life but one. And it was the one at the beginning I was praying for him so hard to restore. And now I know exactly why he didn't. I had to have that. It was part of the journey. And to get over that, I had a resentment towards that. And you know what I did? And real quick, I think I've got 2 minutes. Guys, I had to get on my knees and I had to pray blessings for that person. And I did it and I didn't mean it. The pain was so bad. And every time I saw a white Honda Civic, and there are a lot of white Honda Civics, I could have sworn it was her. And guys, I was a prisoner to this. And I finally started to mean those prayers. I just prayed that God put a good guy in her life, that she is happy, joyous, and free. And all of a sudden I started to mean it. And then I ran into her at a restaurant. and I was free. I walked out of there happy with a huge smile on my face, and that burden had been lifted, just like the burden had been lifted off my sister. The burden had been lifted off of her. That's what this does. That's the power of God. When I am in my resentment and my fear, especially resentment, not only am I in a cage to myself, I'm in a cage to that other person. I'm burdened by that. If you want to be unburdened from this disease, from my ego, if I want to be unburdened from my ego, I work this program every single day and I make it about God. If I'm making it about the newcomer, and then it makes me a better person at work. And every single day I get to see lights turn on in somebody's eyes. Not every single day, but on a regular occasion. And guys, that's better than any high, any drunk that I've ever been on in my entire life. And that was the purpose I was looking for all my life. And I am absolutely blessed. Thank y'all so much for having me.